Hello, welcome to Dot Tone Designs. I am a color separator, and you'll see me on theshirtboard.com, and I'm part owner of theshirtboard.com, and we have a lot of good seasoned expert screen printers that are just excited to help new screen printers and hash out issues that they're having with their business and equipment, and there's a lot going on in there, so please stop by and check that out. And you'll see me in the Facebook screen printing groups. There's various groups in there that I'm a member of that I participate in. I'm going over Adobe Illustrator. I'm working on CS5, and this is just some very basics for the new screen print artists out there that are trying to set up their files. They need to set type and create a basic design and output film. And this is kind of what I'm doing. This is my environment. If you take a look around, this is what I work in. I have, I don't know now, 28, 30 years, maybe 31 years in screen printing, in art, color separation, art creation, designs in various sizes of screen print shops. I worked with in nearby in my town. I worked with small shops, and on the internet, I'd work with bigger shops across the board. So you might have a 6-color manual. You might have 10, 18 color presses in your shop, and there's special effects, basic color, spot color separation, simulated process, the different applications, whether it be indexed or traditional halftone, stochastic halftone printing, you name it, I've done it. And so I'm just going to go over some basics here for you. So if you look at my window, you'll see over here on the left I have my tools. This is kind of how I operate every day. I have some basic functions in here, some tabs, like separation preview, attributes, and info. Jot these down because these are the basic things you're going to use every day. Unless you're getting into heavy design, then you'll be into some filters, some actions, things like that. But I use swatches, strokes, color, pathfinder, and layers. I work in layers a lot. Characters, where I can change my type. The artboard, where I can have a pocket print on one artboard, essentially as a page. Or on another artboard, I'll have the front, and that's all in one file. So that's the gist of artboards. And then when you output, you tell which one you want to output at that particular time. Artboard 1 might be page 1, that might be the front, and so on. So then we have gradients, transparencies, Pantone colors. This is the nuts and bolts of how I separate and or output. So here I have type that I just typed up, and in the type window under character, you can change this up. And basically, I want to select this type, just expand it. I'm going to make the pretty much a square design. So that's scaling the type horizontally, making it wider, the type itself. But inside here is the kerning. So you can adjust the spacing in between the letters and not scale the letters. And in a case like this, where you're trying to fit everything into a square, you can try and do a little bit of both. Expand the distance and also expand the horizontal scale. And I'll do the same for these two guys. Expand that. That's a smaller word, so I can expand. And you notice if I click just once, it's going by 1 increment, and if I hold down my shift key, it's going to go 10, 20, 30, and so on. So it does a little bit faster. Now I got that about the same distance as the top, so I'm going to take the both of them and scale those up just a little bit horizontally. And the other thing that you can do is break those apart, convert the outlines real quick, and now you're dealing with a graphic, so you can drag that over and scale that a lot quicker. You know, but if you wanted to keep the type live, you would do it by selecting that line of type and adjusting individually. So let's go there a little bit and increase the width of the scale just a hair, and the same there. Okay, so basically I have a square looking shape, and I wanted to show you this. It's kind of a gap in between the distances, so you can adjust the leading or the space between the lines of type, kind of make that a little bit more compact. And there are several ways of making a outline stroke around here too. So you can outline the stroke, outline the type. So if you look over on the left in my color window here, you see I type in X, and that's toggling back and forth between the fill and the stroke. And so the box with the hash line through it is the stroke. And so if I go to stroke, I can stroke that thickness with something. So it's stroking with something, but now I go to swatches and I'm looking, it's got black selected, so it does that by default if I want to start stroking something. But I'm going to change the color to white so I can see it. That is a computer white or a process white. Notice the little icon over here on the right side. I'm going to get into how to change that to a spot color here in a moment. But for now, let's look at how I am stroking the outline. So if you look at the key line, and you see that center right there, let me go to rulers, Command R, Control R, and I'm going to drag a ruler right on the center of that edge. Okay, go to key line, and you can see that when I stroke something right now, it's just stroking. If I hover over top of this, it's aligning to the center, so it's stroking from the center out both directions. The distance is 6 points. What that means is it's going 3 points in and 3 points out to the right or to the outside. And so I want to change that up so that I can stroke this, because here's what happens. If you stroke your type, you know, something extreme, and you want a very big fat outer border, you start to fill in because it's stroking to the inside of the type also. So a way to get around that and change up how you are stroking is to work with outlined type. Control Shift O outlines the type, and now it's a graphic element and not live editable type. And so now these two different options for stroking your outline is available. So we'll see how that looks. So that strokes from the center line out, and it says outside. So the inside, it's going to not affect the outside at all, but stroke to the inside. And that really makes letters kind of ugly looking in some respects. You see on the inside of this end, it just looks narrowly thin. So I want to stroke to the outside, and when you stroke, sometimes you want to pay attention to what it's doing to the rest of the letters. For example, I want this to stand out and be more visible, but I also want to decrease it just a little bit so that I have an outline, it's bold, and it also still maintains the rest of the integrity of the letters. So you see how these inside the letter O's and the S's and the D's here, those strokes inside there, are still maintained, so it helps read better when you're doing this artwork. So rather than getting into a bunch of stuff about design, I'll stick with the nuts and bolts, the bread and butter of the basics here. This fill is I think it was a CMYK fill, and these show up here when you open up a new file. They just show up by default, all these different little color options, and so I want to select all of the same color, so I can come in and I can select each one manually, hold down the shift key and add to the selection, or I can go to select same, fill color. You see I got fill and stroke, fill color, opacity, appearance. Those are all nice options. Select same, fill color. Okay, so I got all the blue, and I want to double click on that blue, and I want to make it a custom spot color. So I'll name it custom light blue. But in order to output it, I need to output to film or a direct-to-screen film processor imager. I can change this to a spot color. This is right where you do that. That's the key factor right there. You don't want to output your files as CMYK if they're not going to be CMYK. If you want solid areas here, type in spot color. And right now, this really doesn't matter because it's a generic spot color. This is the appearance of that color. So how it's going to be made up. If you needed to print out a color proof and send that on a paper proof to a customer, or if they are going to print it out and show the rest of their team, you know, hey, do you like this logo? You want those colors to be, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but that might be a little bit more advanced. But you want those colors to be accurate. So I like to use CMYK for the fact that when you use RGB, you might choose colors that are outside the color gamut, and they don't print correctly. So you want to use CMYK color modes when you're creating artwork for screen printing, so that your color proofs output as closely as possible that they can to the artwork and the Pantone colors that you're using. That is a little reminder that I only have about 15 minutes per video, so I have to create a part 2 or 3 and come back to this later, but I have about 2 more minutes, so I'll try and finish up real quick on some other things. Back on spot colors. So it needs to be a spot color. Click OK, and you see that's light blue. And what I can do is pick a particular Pantone color. And this, as a graphics designer in screen printing, or even an owner, if you're just starting out and you're doing all your own artwork and you're trying to go through the basics, you want to have a Pantone book so that you can have a reference or a target for your colors. Let's say you know, your customer in his logo, he uses 285. Well, all you got's light blue. Sometimes you can get by with that, and you can tell the customer, hey, that's all I got. But you really need to have a Pantone colors book and be able to mix those inks or order them from your ink supplier. They'll send you a quart. It gets expensive that way, but they'll send you a quart. Maybe I think they will send you a quart. I know they'll mix up a gallon. You know, it might be harder for them to justify the price on just a quart of it. But a lot of smaller shops, that's all they need is a quart of Pantone 285, which is another reason why I suggest you be able to mix up your inks, your own inks, and get something very, very close to 285, and then your customer's going to be much more happier. You're going to be dealing with some customers that are going to want specific colors. unless you're, printing for just baseball teams, football teams, and high schools and stuff, and they're used to scarlet red and midnight blue and things like that, that the ink suppliers may have on hand. And you can say, well, this is the blue that I have, the light blue. This might be considered what, I don't know, Carolina blue or something like that. But so that's a spot color, and the outside stroke, that is currently a process white. It's computer white. So that's the default white, which is always process. You want to be able to print that out on film as a separate spot color. So we need to A, change it to spot color, and B, indicate that it's going to be a base white or a top white. In most cases, you want to print a base white and a top white on dark shirts. Just so that if you needed to show that up on a white background, you would add some color to that. That could be magenta or something like that. Again, this is just for visual output. Doesn't affect the actual output. It's not going to print ink in magenta color because you have to fill that screen with white ink. But it needs to be told that it is a color. And you needed to see it on screen. If I go to my layers and I hide that, you can still see it. If it's white, you don't see the outline and what it's doing. I'll stop here and go into part 2. Hang on with me.